Oh, thanks, Doug.
Yay. All right. Well, it is 11:11 on my
Oh,
time.
nice. Love it.
So I guess that means now's the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe I would start with if you had any thoughts or comments about our last conversation on the lower chakra triad and getting into the heart. Did you happen to see some of the images that I created? It's okay if you didn't.
No, I did. I like them a lot. Um, it's interesting. It's tracking a lot for me in a number of ways. Just yeah, I've been reading a book that is another Mary Magdalene book, and there is a breathing exercise and process there that works up from the lower chakras up through the seven, and so it's been helpful to have the overlay of the raw material with that. Um, I had been experiencing some new understandings we talked about last time with the lower triad, and I think what was significant for me recently was seeing that with so much of my counseling, therapy, psychology background, not necessarily in formal training, but in a lot of sessions and uh, going through a lot of different modes or modalities of therapy, I saw those dips into the lower triad that might come through catalyst or um, what we call triggers so often now as kind of a journey in for memory, healing, bringing love and light now into those places that seemed dark as a child and that I really wasn't ready to deal with yet, as kind of a process of integration and healing, but as if as those healed, that I would be moving up more and more into the upper chakras. And now it feels like it's more of a cleansing, not a cleansing, but a removal of blockages in those lower chakras so that there is a flow of energy that instead of elevating like from red to, orange to yellow and into green, the green, like you said, draws from the lower triad and energetically is kind of a foundation in a way that keeps me grounded, kind of drawing more from my earth experience and from the earth itself. And so you kind of left it as the heart or the green chakra, almost being like, although the vortex was kind of beginning at red and going up and becoming more focused, that the heart was almost like its own vacuum, if you will, to draw in the communication, experiential process with the lower triad. And then I think my last question was, does it work the same way, sort of in reverse with the upper triad, or is the heart or the green race drawing down from the upper triad as if the heart's kind of the center where those two meet, or just kind of interested in hearing more about the law of one in regards to the upper triad and its relationship to green or the heart. Um, and I'm using terms for chakras that may be more what I'm familiar with, not necessarily um, what Ra had. It was interesting to see you had the many and the one at red and the many, I think, in yellow, and then orange was, I think, um, kind of the lower part of a triangle where the dynamic was between red and yellow and created what I took to be some sort of individualized, unique identity in orange as a differentiation from the one and the many. Because I don't know, I kind of have my own way of looking at that from some of the metaphysical works that I read. But wherein, in the beginning, like with creation, the infinite creator, everything was in this oneness. And as it extended out, uh, to me, where relationship was available, because in oneness, everything can seem like one. And then there had to be the many for there to be a relationship between the creator and itself, so to speak. And then within that many, it seems like that orange might be how to discover or develop your uniqueness within the many, held in between the tension of the one and the many. So um yeah, and then in a lot of like the course of love and these other things I've studied, for me there is then this unique individual extension of the divine as a divine being, in this unique extension, now going back into more of a union, but maintaining that identity in the union instead of the original oneness of Red Ray, is how I'm kind of understanding this.
Well, you are always able to synthesize lots of different things and see nuances. And so it's so fun to talk to you. Yeah, I applaud your work. I learned from you and your experience too. Uh, go ahead. You were about to say something.
I just said thank you.
Oh,
For
yeah.
acknowledging that. Yeah, it's always wonderful to have your perspective of the law of one that seems such an umbrella over it all for me, and it often anchors, in this time when there's so many people channeling so many different entities and so much information coming in, to kind of have kind of a gold standard, if you will, to integrate it through.
Well, I love that you say that. It is for me a gold standard, but it doesn't have to be for everybody. I do feel that those who are unwilling to choose something for a gold standard that is other than their subjective truth or experience, they kind of tend to just not really be able to grow maybe as much as they would want. You'll see, for example, in the tarot that Ra talks about towards the end of the raw contact, the raw material, you'll see several different images where in the left hand, the person is holding a sword or a staff and it goes straight down into the ground. And at that time, when Dawn was dialoguing with the raw group, Dawn was foregrounding the left side as the negative path, the left hand path, those who choose the negative polarity, and was talking about it. But after studying it for so many years and thinking about it, not that I think I'm fairly decent seeker at it, but I don't know if there's ever a master, say, that can get it all. But what I would like to say is something that Dawn missed, that Ra gives nuances, but was going at the pace of Dawn. But Dawn missed the idea that, first and foremost, I think the images on the tarot are electromagnetic. In other words, they're structural. And then on top of that, they're metaphysical. So what I mean by that is the left-hand path with its pointed downward into the ground, the sword that points down, first and foremost can be understood as a grounding, a particularity that I'm incarnating in this one place, in this one body at this particular time. And then it's from that groundedness that I maintain here, that often the images that have the sword that goes down on the left are holding on the right orbs of infinite light and wholeness and possibility. But I think so many seekers might want to kind of like fly with the left hand and go here and then still have the right hand be this orb. it doesn't work that way. If you're going to have electromagnetic stuff to really work, as you know, having worked in electricity for a while, you have to have a grounding thing, and then therefore you can have the light bulb light. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I definitely think that, and I think that's what's been driven home to me so much is the
Mm,
grounding, and then I think too when we talk about in the law of one, the Earth kind of already being capable of hosting fourth density life, which we talk about as green, that a lot of our groundedness to transition um, for humanity and us individually requires that anchoring,
hmm
and that the Earth could actually, we can take in from the Earth uh, pretty organically um, as we ground to it, so to speak, what we need to make progress. And
Yeah.
so I think it's real important.
And I would even say that we actually come from the earth. And so in some ways, the sword has never not been in
Right.
the earth. It's can we awaken to that we're already emerging from the earth
Yeah.
as the earth come to third density, you know?
Perfectly said. Yes. Yes. So important. And it sounds like to me you're kind of describing what my question was a minute ago. If indeed that lower triad is feeding, if we're connected to it, maybe the orb is the upper triad there that then feeds down. And I think if I understand spirituality, some in history, there seemed like there was this effort to escape the material realm, the body realm, and go to that upper and and now it's so much more to me, more like biblically speaking, heaven come to earth instead of us, you know, elevating out of this. And so that earthly connection is how we embody more and more of our true divine identity, that it manifests here and comes into knowing and relationship um, here in this density and such. So
I love that you say that there's a, a hidden, it's not well known and it's not overtly present statue of Saint Francis in Italy, and it's kind of around the corner of the basilica there in Assisi. But I think it's a perfect image of Franciscan spirituality, which is an alternative orthodoxy to understand Christianity that preferences ground up rather than up downward. And you have Francis actually looking down. Usually you have saints pointing up or looking up or, something about let's do this up there. But actually Francis is looking down, pointing down that here in the earth is where God is to be found. So I think that's, for me, that's how Ross speaks about metaphysics without overtly saying it. But I think if you look at it well enough, it's not an ascension. Rather, it foregrounds descension. In other words, if you want to go to fourth density or you want to tap into the higher chakras, we actually have to learn to incarnate here in our bodies in the immediacy of our lives all the more.
yes,
And so the path up, therefore, is the path down, or as
yeah,
Richard Rohr says, it's a falling upward. Where
right,
to go up, you actually learn to fall
yeah,
into
yeah,
more. Yeah. Now, what I want to share with you in terms, we'll just do a quick review of some of the ways that we talked about the chakras before, and to highlight what you have said in your memory of last time. The way I understand the chakras or energy centers are stages of consciousness, in the way that Ken Wilber kind of talks about, differentiates the states versus the stages. states of consciousness can be forays into alternative consciousness, but they're not more permanent stages. A stage in a theater is a solid foundational environment, vibrational environment. But upon that stage, you might have somebody coming in dressed as this character or that character, but then that person leaves when the play is over, but the stage stays. And so stages are more permanent and states are more temporary. And in fact, Ra talks about it'll often take many forays into the Green Ray Compassion Center before that becomes a more permanent stage. So you already see there, from the Law of One perspective, we access these higher centers, but it does not mean that that is the seat of our consciousness,
Right.
because that is an altogether quantum differentiate. It's a qualitative differentiation versus a quantitative movement in upwards in the spectrum or in higher vibrational frequency that allows us to see more expansively for a moment. But usually we come right back down into the stage that we're at, and then we try to interpret the experience that we might have had of non-dual connection with another being or some kind of units of consciousness, but we're going to interpret it from the perspective of our stage. And I think that is where a lot of, let's say, more spiritual seekers miss that nuance, is to interpret a non-dual unitive experience from a lower stage, a lower grade stage, is to, and then talk about it as this is how it is, go on YouTube and have, this is what it looks like, is to, wrinkle and further sometimes confuse the teaching that they're trying to give.
Yeah.
And it confuse themselves too, because then they can become entrapped in the lower triad without recognizing it.
Right.
Yeah, and you and I have talked about that. But the primary centers, as far as I can tell from the raw material, is we've got chakras 1, so the red ray, chakras 3, chakras 5, and 7. 1, 3, 5, 7. That would be like a basic structure, a scaffolding. But a scaffolding in the sense, let's say, notes on a page, musical score. You have the score, the notes that move up and down and so on and so forth, but the notes can only exist and are only, they're good insofar as the spaces in between them too. The periods of silence that punctuate the notes, give the notes their being, are just as important. And so what I'd like to say is the orange ray is the first secondary, not primary, but secondary energy center, but not secondary in terms of second best, but rather a further nuance and the very vehicle through which we learn about ourselves. And so it's highly important. We might even say it is more important in some ways than 1 and 3, but you couldn't have the secondary, the orange, the middle, without 1 and 3. So you can see how they're all important equally, but at the same time, the orange ray, as far as I can see and understand it, is the didactic. It is the center that tries to negotiate and understand this movement between one and the many. Clearly not everybody is uniformly me, uh, and I am not uniformly everybody else. I am me, who is both one and the many, just like the one infinite creator. So this is how you and I are the one infinite creator, experiencing through the sacred tension between the one and the many, between the red and the yellow. See? And when we get to the top in that that triangle that we had pictured, so the flat edge is upwards, and then we've got on the left side on my diagram, we would have the orange. On the right side, we have the yellow, and at the very bottom is we have the orange. And that orange, again, feels the tension. And through the law of three, which is the law of three is every contrasting force that has a tension requires a reconciliation or a resolving of the tension.
Yeah.
And from the law of one perspective, when we can resolve the tension of any given catalyst, of any given moment when a catalyst assaults our senses, if we can resolve that tension, Raw's term is efficiently. So if we can resolve it efficiently so that there's a rebalancing and a harmony, then that orange moves upward towards this, towards the membrane, which would be the membrane between the lower chakras and the heart. Now, there's an ache, there's a restlessness, there's a drive to push forward towards the heart, because the heart, as we had talked about last time, can be envisioned as a vacuum. That is, it's a strange attractor and it's pulling up all of this energy. The natural end toward this energy wants to go to the heart. But when the orange ray is blocked, comes up against that membrane, the top of our triangle, and can't get into the heart, it just keeps butting its head, and because it can't. The only way that we can pass through, it's like there's little Gandalf saying, "Thou shalt not pass." Yeah. The only way to go through into the heart is the path of surrender, of somehow dying to the needs of my false self, dying to the needs of my floating self, and saying, even though I think I'm right, I don't know if I'm right. Or my sense of who I am, I have to call that into question. Maybe I've been wrong. I don't know, but I want to know. Or people who are in recovery, the very first step is we've come to a place in our lives where our lives are completely unmanageable, and then the second one is that, the second step is, and we can't do anything about it. First step is admitting our lives are unmanageable in whatever way. Second step is, and we are powerless to fix it. And then the third step is the surrender. So we've surrendered it all to a higher power of our understanding. That is the gateway, into the heart. And once you're in the heart, you get sucked into this event horizon. You go through the event horizon of the heart. And here is a gathering it is a seeing, it is a gnosis, a knowing, where we can look at ourselves and we can see how we have gotten to where we are at. And blockages is not, some blockages say we can see more clearly our own blockages, but we're not going to try to remove them. We don't remove the blockages. Blockages are there precisely because they've gotten us to the point where we're in the heart. So why would we want to remove That would be like climbing to a tall building and then pulling the ladder away and saying, "Oh, but I still have to get down." So no, we have to bless the blockages. But that's the weird thing is in blessing the blockages and understanding them and blessing them, we remove the power they have to uh, keep us entrapped in the lessons that they're trying to teach us.
Yeah.
So I've had clients, and myself included, where, God, I remember when I was a real jerk at that particular time in my life, but if I hate myself in that jerkiness, then that just contributes to the same energy that created the jerkiness state, ego state that I have inside of me.
Yeah.
What do you think about what I'm saying so far? I just want to check in.
Well, I have, excuse me, a number of thoughts about that. Well, first, what I thought of is in some of the works that I have spent time in, like A Course in Miracles and A Course in Love, which the two are related. In A Course in Miracles, Jesus talks about the vision, and he gives this new vision, and it's almost a new mind that holds a lot more truth, say, than where we're currently at. I found the other day something that amazed me, because it was in one of the exercises that says, this is the vision, but the experience of the vision is not the matter or the content or the purpose of this course. That's for another time and place, so to speak. So I kind of see that as, when you have these stages that view a what was the term you used? Something more elevated state. The state is like a vision given. And I noticed a tendency with people to take that state and try and mentally go through mental gymnastics to believe they're there and stay there. And that's not going through the experiential stage that can come and happen to move into that. So I think what keeps that from happening is what you said, that the other stages, or maybe say, like, if you catch the vision of green ray and you try and go there without going through the experience of say that lower triad that you're in, you really don't experientially walk into it. And so I see that as a real way of practicality. And for me, when the Course of Love came along, it walked us through the experiential process of into what was earlier the vision, or it really brings about the heart becoming with the mind integrating in the heart. So that really resonates for me. That those states, and a lot of people, we have a lot of them nowadays, especially with the experiences, of plant medicines and things where different states are seen, but the integration of movement in is still a lot of work. And also, what resonated to me was when you talked about, I thought of a chord on the piano, which is always, a chord is 1-3-5,
Yeah.
and yeah, and so if you took a C chord and you did your 1-3-5, which would be C, E, and G, but 2 is the D, and it doesn't really, it's a tension between the C and E, but where it resolves is in a new 1-3-5, which would be the fourth note in that chord, or a step up in chords to another 1-3-5, and the seventh always fits also in the triad. So I mean, that was something, it's like, okay, yeah, there's that tension that doesn't fit. The D doesn't, it doesn't really sound right in that chord. But then if you move up to 4 or the new 135, it resolves. But then you have a new one in the middle, so that's
So let's
interesting.
play with that. And I mean that in all the punny kind of ways. Let's play that.
That went right over my head. Okay, yeah.
Because based on what I was saying earlier, based on what you just said, let's combine them and say that the 1 and the 3, or the C and the E and the G, would not have harmony if it weren't for the absence of being played at the same time, the notes in between.
Exactly. If you did all 5, it would not resonate at all for you, I don't think. Yeah.
Right. So let's say you're in I'm in the lower chakra triad, and let's say I'm bumping up to the very top of it. Okay. But my heart is restless, and I keep seeking, and how do I get into the heart? And let's say at that level, academically, I'm understanding that 1, 3, 5 create a chord. Maybe academically, I even understand that I can't play D and all the other notes in between, because then it wouldn't be harmony. And yeah. So I understand this, but let's say that I have been overemphasizing the basic structure of the C chord. In other words, thinking the C chord is the only truth. And it dawns on me right at the very top, when I've tried everything else and I want to get into the heart because I feel its pull, that maybe there are other chords. So I have to die, surrender to my grip on trying to play the C chord and understand it. I have to die to it. I have to say, well, even though it's gotten me here, I don't know if it's true, or can I open it up for other things? All of a sudden we die, and then you get into the heart, and then you're able to say, oh, wait a minute, it resolves. And that brings me into even another place. Oh, wow. There's whole different harmonies. But I had to die to my over rigidity of trying to fit the C chord to be everything. And now I'm open to, like, the whole point of unitive consciousness, to see that there's an orchestra, a symphony that's playing all different beats, and I have just one little part to it. But I never would have been able to enjoy the full symphony had I not died to the grip of my one way to see it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you could also bring in the aspect of the state, where the fifth note of the chord might be the vision of this higher state, but you can't go there. But yet it's that brings you from the 1 and 3 tension now to the new 135, which would have been your 2-4. And in that new chord, you now have a new state that kind of draws you.
Right.
That's interesting to me, that you're not going to that particular state that you're being given, but it's a stage below it.
Right.
But it takes that energy, like you told me the other day, Dan, to stay in green. You have to be experiencing blue. And I'm like, how do I experience blue when I'm not stabilized in green? But by moving into the blue, it was actually putting out, to me, like support roots or tentacles that help hold me and suspend me in green as I experienced still the lower triad, was the way that seemed to come to me in a visual way of understanding.
And I could be just super naive about this, but I almost feel like true green ray entities, humans who have activated the green ray but don't move to blue, they don't stay in green too long. I don't see how they could, because you're going to be, people who are in green are enjoying this unitive consciousness, but not yet trying to incarnate the unitive consciousness in acts of loving service, and then maybe and not exploring deeper ways to plant those roots. So then they go in the face of blockages of other people, trying to bring green to them, and end up becoming martyrs, the martyr syndrome or whatever. You know, how many, let's say, females have I counseled over the years who are really green ray, but they see these males as almost projects. You know, like, I'm going to help this guy. I feel called to help this guy who doesn't have a good mommy or whatever. Anyways, they get pulled back into the narcissism of a very blocked male
Yeah.
in many cases. And, they remain in some ways, the fragrance or residue of the green ray is very much there, but they have to play all the games of the lower chakras. And that's their tension. It's like, oh, I'm so miserable.
Yeah. Well, that's brilliant, Doug. And it makes sense to me that unless you have some sort of anchoring in the blue
Mm-hmm.
to help you stay in the green space tension, you can't really have your movements in and out of the lower triad. That maybe you have some completing work to do there, or certainly those around you that are still more in that triad, you would get drawn back into it. So
Yeah, even St. Paul, or Paul the Apostle, when I'm talking to a person from a Catholic perspective, I'll say St. Paul. When I'm talking to someone who's non-Catholic, I have to say Paul the Apostle.
right.
But anyways, you'll see hints there because he says in one of his letters, he says, I am all things to all men. Whenever I'm with the Romans, I am as a Roman. When I'm with the Greeks, I am as a Greek. When I'm with the Gentiles, I'm as a Gentile. And the whole point was to bear witness to this wholeness, this consciousness, this Christ consciousness, you know, as he understood it at his historical context. But I think that that's important because from my perspective, again, could be very wrong. But a Blu-ray entity, he was really talking about a Blu-ray entity. And a Blu-ray entity, therefore, is grounded in this very more, it's a unitive place and a sense of self-identity and who I am is as co-creator. Now I'm not looking for God anywhere else other than I'm inside of the force field of God looking out into creation. You see, it's a transposition of consciousness, as Cynthia Bourgeault would say. Then, I'm working from the blue and I can, not in a sense of trying to fit in, but I will speak the energetic language to somebody who would only understand this particular energetic language, in order to help them grow into the green ray if that's their desire. That's why the Enneagram is helpful, because if I know the Enneagram, if I'm with an 8, I will speak to them in a way that respects their 8 energy and that can trust me. So therefore I'll say fuck you a lot because, you know, they really like to have, yeah, you get me. You're not going to let me bullshit.
Yeah.
But if I'm with a 2 or a 1 or something, I try to, affirm them from their own inherent value system, given their Enneagram type, but then using their value system, try to invite them into what it might look like to have to die to their compulsions, their Enneagram compulsions, in order to rise or be resurrected in their gifts, their giftedness.
Yeah, and the wholeness that takes for the person doing it requires a lot of integration through,
Yeah.
Through, if we deal with the chakras or understanding the other Enneagram types, because until we've transitioned and worked through those, I think those people actually trigger us into reactive places below instead of holding that and understanding, like you say, what's going on, not in a judgmental or superior way, but just really and truly being in solidarity with them for what's going on. And I can't do that if I still have unresolved things in that area. Now I'm always in that process, so I may find it going on at the same time. Oh, there's that, and I might even have a work through it in the moments I'm with them or and such. So um, yeah, and the relationships that become mirrors for us to see and know these things. And then for me, which you do for me a lot, is you can hold that container for me. Sometimes I'm doing that with others a lot, but I tend to wear out, or I kind of find myself looking for, uh, you know, talking to Mother Mary a lot, or Jesus or someone, like, okay, come do this for me. Help me, you know,
Yeah.
uh, anchor me from above, to stay here because I need something new. I need a firmer base, um, or firmer place in this stage, so I can deal with stages of my life that still are below me, and that I'm drawing energy from, but also a vision for the new, also something new pulling me on up.
Yeah, I love that. I myself have to make sure that outside of my role of teacher and counselor, uh, that I have people that I can be vulnerable with and trust that they can hold me in a nurturing place. Um, because I have to keep learning on a personal level how to surrender and trust. Um,
Mm.
and also, yes, connecting with this transcendent sense of love and God through meditation or other different things is vitally important for a person in the blue ray. But I want to go back and talk about the structure again. So we had mentioned the triangle, the downward pointing triangle. One corner is red, one corner is yellow. So we have the one and the many, and then the orange is the negotiation. That Ra calls this the self, the identity self, in a sense. That's not Ra's terms, but basically this is identity, and it gets nuanced, and if that self is using the really good, efficient, doing catalyst efficiently, moves into the green, then the way I understand it is now make another pyramid, but it's pointing up. So it's sitting, the bases are now touching. You have the lower triad, it's a downward, and the upper triad is pointing up. And what I'd like to do here is, you know how on the red we said that was the one and the yellow was the many?
Yes.
Here's an interesting thing is when we have a stable and balanced and robust lower triad, the trunk of the tree, which is made up of many different fibers inside that are strong, so the many become one, we can actually position the lower triad as a new one. It's a new unity. It is a platform now upon that is a singular unity, and it becomes a new one. So it's located, let's say, overlaid upon the red. And then what is the mini? Instead of the yellow, we can put violet, purple, because this is the infinite mininess of intelligent infinity from Ra's perspective. Or from a Whiteheadian standpoint, this would be the realm of the quantum, the quantum cloud of infinite possibilities and eternal objects that are there wanting to be brought in, wanting to be brought
Yeah.
in. So here we have the many in terms of infinite potentials. That's the purple. And then the one is the newly concretized to a point, to a certain degree, crystallized lower triad. So it's stable enough to be its own oneness. We have one in the many. And then at the very top of the triangle is the blue. This is the co-creator. Ra talks about the blue entity as being the co-creator, the energy center, the seat of consciousness inside of unitive consciousness, inside of this sense that I am God, having an experience of Doug, and I have agency to create inside of this bandwidth of consciousness, this third density, large environmental vibrational condition, this condition of vibrations here. I have agency to bring in wholeness, which is the manyness. This is the infinite variety, the intelligent infinity. I have agency to bring in wholeness that wants to be brought into manifestation. I have this agency, and that's what a co-creator learns. And this is the Blu-ray. I'm wondering if it's similar to your own experience as a very adept construction guy. That I remember you telling me you didn't know much about painting and all that stuff at the very beginning. You were just like, dude, I need to do something. And,
Right.
you had to go through a period of learning, your period of, oh crap, I messed that up. Better redo it. At some point, you probably had to surrender to yourself. Well, I kind of suck at this, but I'm going to keep going. And then eventually you get pretty good. At some point, I'm assuming you had enough mastery over things to realize that you can not only be a student, but you can actually bring new beauty in that others can't even imagine yet. The people that say your clients, for whom you're doing a project, you're able to like visualize something that they can't see yet, but you knowing what their needs are and knowing what your skills are, you can say, what about this?
Yes.
And it's somehow not what they would have thought of, but the end result is something that they're more pleased than they ever could have been.
Yes. Yeah, I think so. And the ability to see it for them and then manifest it where it is knowable. Yeah, I think it is that
And
process.
touchable, tangible.
Yeah, tangible. Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
co-creating.
that's co-creating. In like Course of Love language, that's very much what that movement is to become a co-creator of the new, which allows that incarnation of that infinite field of potentiality to come through. And of course, it's a whole new manifestation that's not out of course, there the distinguishment would be the small self or maybe the ego mind that's always laboring to manifest things. And now there's this surrender and a joint will with something above that now manifests out of that field of potentiality. Very much that resonates for me. It's interesting, though, that would be in blue. Not that it wouldn't, but and I don't know where all you want to go with that, but it makes me wonder when you mentioned, I guess, the violet and then the lower triad as maybe the other polarity of this, through which the blue is at the top. Where would indigo and green be in that? Is green somehow in between these two triangles, or talk to me about that if you want.
Yeah. The way I understand it is when a person has their now more permanent stage of consciousness in blue, it reconfigures the energy of the whole thing. And so now you remember we have almost a diamond shape. So we have the downward pointed triangle. We have the upper pointed triangle. So you picturing in your head almost a diamond, right? Or yeah, a
Yes.
square on its side. Okay. Um, it's a new unity where the whole thing is a sea of green, love
Oh,
itself. And the boat that is floating upon this sea is indigo.
wow.
Um, so maybe the launch pad or home base uh, or wherever is at the very top. This would be the blue. Because for me, the indigo is a reformation. Really, the indigo is a blue at master level.
Oh,
It's a co-creator instead of a junior gardener. It's a master gardener.
okay.
Yeah. Um, so, but the whole sea, this diamond that we've created is one emerald green sea of units of consciousness, and indigo would be the boat, and so the co-creator, the blue, would gets inside the boat and go where the boat wants, where the co-creator wants to go. But that at that point, that is an indigo level adept who can tap into intelligent infinity, the many, and then transfer that over to help heal bodies, which would be very red ray for other bodies, or can go and be an oracle to help people heal their mind, that their capacity to see themselves as a crystallized healer, that they're able to be put into places where they're operating at a high enough degree level that they know that they are God, being able to tap into all of the energetics. It's not just what we see, but it's what is, from the physical standpoint, unseen, but very much seen and experienced by the adept. And the adept can go to these places at will because they're operating in the indigo way. And so what Ross said is the foray into, like, the movement from green ray into blue ray is right there. It does require a desire to be a co-creator, but it's not overly effortful. However, to become an indigo ray adept is effortful. It requires, in our little metaphor here, it requires learning how to operate the boat. It requires learning how to operate and mechanically operate the boat. So there's all kinds of mechanics that go into subtle energetic work. Yeah. What
Would
are your
you,
thoughts on this?
well, then, I was wondering about, do you see Ra or the Confederation um, as that for us? Because that, I mean, when you speak of sixth density, I think would indigo be kind of that description would apply to kind of how they function in the universe for us, so to speak?
Not the
Or
full confederation. The confederation it's a confederation of various benevolent beings that are incarnated inside of a spectrum of densities. And so you've got fourth, fifth, and sixth that are inside. And so they're going to be helping and serving in the way that is appropriate for their bandwidths of consciousness, their own lessons that they're learning. But the indigo, which is where Ross says that they are basically advanced or late sixth density beings. They are unified. There's no more polarities internally. There's no more, or let's say, disharmony, or perfect crystallization of internal crystallization, each individuated being inside of the united group of Ra, but also Ra themselves as what I like to call a collective or a community organism. They're a community and they're one organism. They're cells in one body called Ra. And that itself is efficient. Like that organism, that one self, there's very little distortion. It's a crystallized entity. So that would be the sixth density, is bringing in love, and of the fourth density, that's the lessons of the fourth density. The fifth density is wisdom. How I understand that is co-creators and seeing all of the nuances of karma and understanding the variations and spectrums of light and all of this. So that it's a long coursework of lived experiential experiences of being a co-creator. And the sixth density is a re-engagement now at the master level of trying to be basically incarnating as and choosing intentionally to be God's active force to help bring balance in God's chakras, which are the densities. So just like you have 7 chakras, let's say God has 7 chakras, and those chakras are densities. And the other thing I want to share is Ra talks about planetary entities as being a social memory complex. So, for example, when Ra sees humanity, we'll call them Terran. We'll call our collective humanity as the Terran entity. Terra being Earth. The Terran entity, Ra only sees a singular organism that is not yet awakened to its inherent united state.
Okay.
And in fourth density, the Terran entity will become, instead of the collective unconscious, it'll become collective conscious.
Yeah.
That retains the individuated beings who all, if you will, die to their need to be individuated and become collective, even as that honors the individuation.
Yeah.
That's a social memory complex. And at that point, the planet from which they evolved is the whole planet, including the beings that are fourth density, are one organism. The planet is one organism. Because we come from the planet, you see. And so Earth and Earth's beings are one giant, massive, integrated organism. Okay. And so that's called a planetary entity that could be made up of billions of individuated souls. But here's an interesting thing is, even though Ra doesn't say this explicitly, I think implicitly it's very much implied, is that at the level of sixth density, one of the paths to advance through sixth density is actually to die. Remember, it's all dying and rising, loss and renewal, is dying to its planetary connection. So for Ra, it was on Venus. And then actually becoming the consciousness level of the sun. They're solar entities now. So, for example, and then you have a connection with the Egyptians, because the Egyptians, of course, they saw the sun as being Ra, which for them meant a unified deity, But Ra, the group that came from Venus, indeed is you could see it almost as the layer of consciousness of the sun body, just like Terrans, you and I, human collective the human unconscious collective unconscious. We are the membrane of consciousness of the earth. And whenever we achieve a social memory complex, this unified, intentional, unified complex, we become what Pierre de Chardin would say, Teilhard de Chardin, is the noosphere. It's activated.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so that is a planetary entity. In fourth density, we would be probably call it Terrans. We'd be known as this is, and maybe it's just Danny that goes and visits another planet, but you wouldn't be saying, "Hi, I'm Danny from Earth." If you're fourth density at that level, it would be, and the planetary entity Terran is here. And like, you see what I'm saying? Like but you're also you completely united
Yeah, I would
to
be
this.
carrying that consciousness with me.
Yeah,
It would be the one in the many
right. Embodied.
embodied
Yeah,
at that level. Yeah.
that's right. That's
Yeah.
right. And so you would be a portal or an interface for the entire collective.
Yes.
Um, but I think in sixth density, there's a dying that has to happen of some kind of metaphysical attachments to the planet from which they involve, just like it is for a fourth density group who's not yet become a social memory complex. There's a dying to self of we are this tribe.
Yeah.
We don't want to belong to the rest of the tribe. There's a dying to self. I am this person. It's a dying to self in order to rise in the collective, but not
Yeah.
like the Borg society,
Right.
where it's uniformity. It's still very much unity, diversity maintained,
Yeah.
But I think for sixth density growth, it is actually a releasing of, or a dying, if you will, to the individuatedness that happened upon Venus. And then it's a transcending and it's becoming more actively the very noosphere of the solar entity.
Wow.
And
And is
and
that
Ross,
like, would that be
go
the
ahead.
seventh? Is that a seventh kind of
No, I think
graduation or no?
it. I think that it might be some kind of crystallization in the seventh. But I feel like I mean Ross says, for example, at certain stages in sixth density, sunlight, certain parts of sunlight, certain qualities of sunlight that you and I receive are actually the generative offspring of sixth density beings, in the act of generative love, making love as light, furthering light of
Wow.
unitive. Yeah. So the very sun, like in sixth density, Ross says, sun can be inhabited, because it's all light.
Wow.
And so you almost have the same thing that happens in third density. We have individuated beings, creation come to self-awareness and then choosing polarity. And then in fourth density, the earth, let's say now becoming much more quickly then because of harmony, becoming a chosen unity that crystallizes into a unified organism.
Mm.
The cells, we are members of one body, Christ, that's all intuited. Uh, the church, the seed form of the ecclesia or church actually comes to full consummation in fourth density, but it's still very much attached to the planet
Yeah.
Earth. We are Terran, whereas in sixth density, it is an including of that, but transcending so much so that the whole heliosphere, the very body of the sun, which includes the entire heliosphere, I would assume, becomes this. The more that you're unified into the sun, the more that you become the sun's noosphere. consciousness. So you really are the solar deity.
Mm.
You know, we all are, but I think at the sixth level and above, it is a lived conscious gnosis and all that that entails. Yeah. I don't know. These are things that are absolutely
Yeah.
intuited by Ra and implicit, but never explicitly shared. I don't know. I
Oh,
could be
wow.
wrong too.
Is that right? Okay. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
So, getting back now to Earth, how do we live inside of this unit of consciousness where the ocean is green ray, um, and it's unpolluted by the the issues of an unresolved lower chakra, lower triad, and how do we live as blue ray entities in a world that is very clearly orange yet? This is really crazy because Roth says that they see our planetary body, Earth, is inside of green ray energy, but that green ray energy cannot get into Earth's consciousness except through beings, you and me, and those who say yes to this, as being incarnate third densities, doing the work enough to be able to bring in, Whitehead's eternal object, the eternal object of green ray, bringing it in and incarnating it, and then loving others as blue ray entities, giving the world green ray incarnate love.
Yeah.
So when you, for example, as a blue ray entity and fully, in, seated in that inside of that consciousness, when you go and you give the gift of eldership, mentorship, um, to other people in a way that respects their free will, but lures them into gently lures them into higher ways to
Mhm.
see their own life. When you're doing that, you are giving them the gift, the incarnated intelligence of green ray, love and understanding. You're helping them to understand themselves and understand their world around them. And that's the vocation right now of wanderers, in my opinion.
Wow.
What
Yeah.
do you think about that? Does it bring up any thoughts or any ways that you've thought of other, things?
Well, on a personal level, it speaks to me of the challenge um, of living that wherever I see myself, and it can vary some days. Some days feel very much. Well, it's very helpful. This is new to me to try and what I might, in my own words, incarnate green ray life almost from a blue ray relationship. Um, of co-creation. Um, that helps me because it almost is making kind of a state more relative to sustainability of a stage, which I guess would be green. I think I was trying to,
Mm-hmm.
not trying, but I think my perception, limited as it is, was so much from holding a green ray when there almost needed to be a vision of what's above and beginning to experience that to hold green. Um, it also helps me a lot in relationships I'm in with some of these channeled courses that, whether it be Paul Selig and Melchizedek, the guide, speaking of the upper room, or the courses, the Age of the Heart, the Green Ray Chakra, uh, and the problems I see with people trying to make this leap into a state from a stage, and not and the steps and all the integration that goes on in between, and maintaining the relationship with the lower triad. So that's very, very helpful for me. As you say it, I realize the hardest relationships are the ones I'm the closest in,
Oh yeah.
because that's where I might trigger into to something that's like, oh my gosh, am I even of value in this? Am I not creating more issues than helping, sometimes. And I guess that's just part of it, and the acceptance, the awareness, the acceptance.
Let me stop you and just tell you right there that when you let's just say that when you as a Blu-ray entity get triggered by a catalyst of the moment through your intimate relationships with people that you're around a lot, and maybe they're acting a fool or you act a fool, and it's like, oh, why did I do that? Okay. When you can know yourself, accept yourself, forgive yourself, balance yourself, open yourself up to more love, that is one of the greatest ways that you actually release green ray energy, not only inside of yourself, but to the world. By doing
uh,
your own work in the way that is appropriate for the level of a co-creator who's bringing wholeness into this bandwidth of consciousness of separation, the third density. The way that you do that most effectively, I think, is through your own seeing and integrating the self, your own self, in the ways that are talked about. And then that is releasing it to the world.
yeah. Yeah. It's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. That's very helpful. I like that. Yeah.
Well, we've gone about an hour and a half.
Okay.
I think this is a good place to stop, and I'll put this out. Uh, is there anything specifically edited wise that you'd like me to take out?
No, Doug, not that I can think of. Whatever you, as the podcaster professional,
Yeah.
never done one before. So yeah, wherever you see
Okay.
it. Yeah, this has been wonderful. Very, very helpful for me. Very,
Me
very
too.
meaningful. Yeah.